The not so good news is that the enemy continues offensive actions in the Sumy region. Unfortunately, they have had some tactical successes over the past days and weeks, trying to advance further, build on their gains, and cut off our logistics. However, our forces continue containment operations, and the enemy is suffering significant losses. It appears, it seems, that the Russian command has decided to redeploy some troops from the south, from the Zaporizhzhia direction, specifically to the Kursk region, in order to advance offensive operations in the Sumy region. Well, the goal is clear: to stretch our forces, as I mentioned before, in order to intensify offensive actions in the Donetsk region. The objective was, and continues to be obvious. It is the attempt to capture Donetsk region within its administrative territorial borders. And the enemy is trying to act accordingly there. Our forces continue the containment operation. The fighting remains fierce, so we keep our fingers crossed for our soldiers. And as part of our defensive operation in the Sumy region, in particular, the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine is also engaged. And now coming to this very important news, which happened for the first time, unprecedentedly. In fact, there was a collision in the sky between an F-16 and a Russian Su-35. A battle between a NATO aircraft and a Russian aircraft, likely adversaries. That is, well, nothing like this has happened since the days of the USSR. Back then, even if something did happen, it was usually just accidental incidents. Of course, there were provocations, primarily from Soviet aviation, which tried to conduct reconnaissance and carry out flights and so on. But there were no actual air battles like this. That's why this is a precedent. This is a very important event. So what happened? Remember the other day, over the weekend, I told you about the Russian Su-35 that was shot down in the sky over Kurshina. This was officially reported by the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And immediately the version I considered, given that, well, it's hard to imagine that long-range air defense systems like Patriot, or at least NASAM's most likely Patriot or SAM-2, operating directly on the border with Russia. It's difficult because we clearly understand that within the range of enemy drones, aircraft, and even more so guided aerial bombs, well, there are quite a lot of dangers. That's why the initial version was that it was indeed the actions of aviation. And now we have relevant information from sources about how exactly this happened. So it was a combined planned operation. A Swedish Saab aircraft is already operating in the sky. This is a long-range radar reconnaissance and detection aircraft that was provided to us by our northern friends. Sweden, Denmark, Norway in general, the Scandinavians, plus Finlandare, very actively supporting Ukraine, providing assistance, intelligence information, political support, diplomatic, economic, military, everything they possibly can. And so the Saab, this aircraft, detected something in the sky, and it was operating, flying at a distance of over 200 kilometers right up to the Kursk region, and it identified a Su-35 aircraft, which was carrying out combat missions directly and was covering Su-34 aircraft that was striking with KAB bombs on the territory of Sumy region and beyond. So, during the operation, after the aircraft was detected, Ukrainian F-16s were patrolling the sky, received the appropriate target designation, and destroyed the Su-35 with an American AIM-120 missile. The Ukrainian crew successfully returned from the combat mission. The target was hit. According to available information, the pilot ejected. The further fate the Russian pilot ejected from the Russian Sukhoi, his subsequent fate, is currently unknown. But this is how the strike happened. The distance to the Su-35 was, or could have been, 16 to 17 kilometers, and the target was hit. So we see that the combination of long-range radar detection aircraft surveillance plus the use of F-16s by our Air Force is yielding results. And obviously the effectiveness and reliability are explained by the fact that even a small number of such aircraft, given a well-planned operation and its organized execution, can deliver results. Now, I assume that Russian aviation will be somewhat more cautious about taking bold actions. It must be said that these are risky actions. They are bold and very decisive on the part of our pilots, for which they deserve honor, praise, and gratitude. Because indeed they carried out the mission quite audaciously in the best sense of the word. And again, when we talk about the Kursk region, the goal is the defense of Sumy region. In other words, All components of our armed forces are working to prevent the enemy from achieving results there. Therefore, I think that now Russia will try to conceal certain things. They will try to change certain things, obviously their tactics, because our F-series aircraft are active, our pilots are working, and I think Mirages will be added as well. In addition, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has confirmed successful strikes on the territory of Savasleyka. This is an airfield where MiG-31K aircraft and Su-type planes are stored and based. In addition to these strikes, there were also attacks on Russian territory, specifically on a factory that produces antennas and communication systems for Shahed-type drones, which Russia uses to terrorize our peaceful cities, target our civilians, and in fact commit acts of terrorism. What the enemy is doing, these are their methods of warfare. In other words, strikes are being carried out. They are systematic. They have already taken on a systematic nature. We can state this especially in regard to Russia's military-industrial complex. The difficulty lies in the fact that there are many such facilities on the enemy's territory. To strike all of them at once, no matter how much we might wish to, is absolutely impossible, no matter how much we, let's say, hope for it. But it is quite difficult. However, to strike gradually and try to exhaust the enemy is the right approach. So once again, I'll return to this point and repeat myself. Perhaps I've tired someone out, but I'll say it again. We must use all methods and possibilities of asymmetric warfare. We see that we are able to strike Russia, to carry out large-scale successful operations like Putina, to hit Russian military-industrial complexes, to strike oil depots, to target their rear, logistics, places where manpower, equipment, forces and resources are concentrated. Undoubtedly, this needs to be done, and our defense forces of Ukraine will continue to work on this. In addition, information has emerged from a group of OSINT observers who note that, in fact, as of now, in this already the fourth year of the ongoing full-scale aggressive Russian invasion, the number of Russian towed artillery pieces has been reduced by almost half. That is, if there were about 5,000 such artillery pieces in storage at the beginning of 2022, now there are fewer than 3,000 left. This is also the result of the destruction of these artillery systems and the exhaustion of the enemy. God willing, may this depletion continue. But this will not happen unless we support our forces, join the armed forces of Ukraine, and remain united and consolidated. Friends, subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to leave your comments. I read everything. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your kind words. As you can see, I've already recovered a bit. I'm continuing to work. And remember, despite everything, with confidence and God's help, we look and move only forward. Take care of yourselves, and glory to Ukraine.